And go.
And go.
And
Ukraine wins Eurovision.
Big news this week. Or
astonishing. Who would have thought?
As it's called in Russia, the Gayrovision.
Is it?
Yes.
Terrible. Global drag contest.
Kind of, yeah.
It's, that first happened in 2014. I don't know if it's a coincidence.
The bearded lady.
Yeah. The Conchita.
Conchita, the bearded lady from Israel.
The Austrian fella. Wasn't he Austrian?
There was an Israel one too. There was a couple, more than one.
Yeah, Israel won later. There was a whole sequence of weird things, and it really going strange.
With
Eurovision
Conchita.
was always campy and strange. That's fine. Everyone liked it for being campy and strange right in the 70s.
Right.
But in 2014, it went mental.
Yeah.
Bearded lady,
Yeah.
Austrian, and then...
Maybe we should explain to people.
And then Ukraine won already at that time. And that was a sympathy vote. And it was dirty, dirty stuff because Russia was the favourite. And they had, an obviously catchier, nicer tune.
Right,
and they lost out at the death
in
for the sympathy
2014
vote.
because of the Crimea thing.
Yeah.
And but maybe we should explain to people who don't know what the Eurovision actually is. Eurovision Song Contest, it's called.
Who doesn't know what it is?
Americans.
Okay.
At all. Do not know.
Do they not participate? Australia has an entrant.
Yeah, for some weird reason. Don't know why. Anyway,
It's more like the NATO.
it was originally meant to be, and it goes back, 60 years. It was a European amateur, supposedly, music contest, song contest.
Yeah.
Eurovision Song Contest. That's why it's called the Eurovision Song Contest. And it was just, people tuned into it. It was like from each country went through the process of selecting their candidates, and they went forward. They won, and they went forward to the Eurovision Song Contest. Kind of like a sporting event.
Or what we call today talent contest.
A talent contest,
TV
a Euro talent contest. So each
And they had to
country,
be genuinely amateur. They could not be
yeah,
already...
yeah. Although they've fudged that in recent
Well,
years,
big time, yeah.
But anyway, so it's been going for 60 years. It used to be kind of good. There used to be some good songs, and different countries won. Ireland won a bunch of years in a row, to the point where they didn't want to win anymore because it cost a lot of money to set the whole thing up, and they were getting tired of having to spend the money to actually
Yeah,
set.
because the winning entrant, that country hosted
the next year,
And
yeah.
Ireland had like 7 years in a row or
Right,
something.
or something like that, crazy. Anyway, so it was all right. And then, like you said, in recent years, it just started to become a lot more political and cultural. Well, I suppose cultural anyway, but it became a lot more political in that sense.
Ideological, yeah.
Where it started to reflect the whole kind of fairly extreme left-wing ideologies.
It became manically obsessed with reflecting the current thing.
Inclusion and diversity, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, which turned obviously certain section of the population off it, right? But anyway, the reason we're talking about it now is because it was held yesterday. The final was yesterday. There's a longer process during the week, whatever. Final entrants who get into the final selected yesterday, and of course everybody was expecting Ukraine to win for obvious reasons, right? Even though their entry was kind of crap. And
Did you actually listen to any of this stuff?
a few, yeah, but the Ukrainian song was particularly crap, in the sense that it's like a bunch of weird looking Ukrainian guys. One of them looked like he's tattooed all over his whole body, and in the band.
Oh, that's normal these days.
Yeah, and they're weirdos, and they're singing in Ukrainian, of course, no Russian allowed, and
So most Ukrainians won't be able to follow it.
right, and it's yeah, it was it was no good basically, but they won anyway, because for political reasons, the song was kind of like a rap song, so it was like it was like Western values absolutely up the wazoo. So a bunch of white guys, all, which isn't strange these days, all kind of rapping in Ukrainian. That was it.
Something about world peace.
Not about world. No, actually, that's the
Killing Ruskies.
well, if you just go to you can get a view of it. Go to the YouTube video where I have the marker on it there, Scotty. This is after. So this is they've won, right? They announced the one. Actually, just to set this up, each country has a panel. Each participating country has a Eurovision panel of people who vote themselves. So a small panel votes and gives between 0 and 12 points to each song, and they go through that whole process. So that's the panels, right? And it was just that panel that voted on it, right? But then in recent years they introduced public voting on top of that, so the public then gets to vote. So after the panels voted, which is traditionally the end of it, like whoever the panel gave most points to from each country, then that country wins. But that wasn't the case this year and for the past few years. So after the panels had finished their voting, Ukraine was like 5th or 6th. The UK was top. But then the public vote was announced. Now the public vote, how do you get? I mean, ripe for manipulation of it.
Finding ballots at the last second.
Right, yeah, public vote, it can be whatever. So the public vote gave Ukraine a massive amount of votes and they won, basically, and it's over. Anyway, so the video is that after they've been announced that Ukraine won and they're also very happy. You can play a little bit of it, I suppose. I think, do they actually play the song? Are they singing a song there? Anyway, you have it at 3:10. So, this is actually just before the... I don't know. At some point, it's when it's over and they've won. And the thing about it is that the Eurovision Song Contest for its whole history has never allowed any political statements. Politics was not, it's officially still today not permitted.
Since 2014,
not permitted to be part of it,
Yeah.
right? Officially, but obviously an extremely political statement made by the guy from that Ukrainian band there that won. Help Azov style. Obviously, people know what he's talking about. It's the Ukrainian Azov Battalion, pretty much mostly Azov Battalion fighters who are neo-Nazis, avowed neo-Nazis, have been for a long time, the kind of people who have been bombing Donbass for the past, had been for the past 8 years, since 2014, killing civilians in Donbass. And then they're actually part of the reason these people who are now in the bunkers underground, the Azovstal metal plant, ironworks, whatever, steelworks, have been there for several weeks, are trapped there, and there's a whole public, propaganda offensive by Western media and Western governments to help the poor people in Azovstal. There's something about the fact that someone down there someone in that plant and underneath the plant is important. I think it's either that or they're simply using it as a big propaganda ploy to try and win hearts and minds and get the public outpouring of sympathy for these people.
There must be something to the theories then.
Right, because
otherwise they would have dropped this by now.
Yeah,
because it's
ignore it,
gone,
let it go,
it's lost.
Yeah. But it's something, I suppose, it's been latched onto as a way to leverage or to use as leverage to put pressure on Russia or make Russia look bad in the international community or get the public behind the poor guys in Azovstal, when in fact they're actually a bunch of neo-Nazis who have been, killing civilians and, avowed right-wing racist military types who are stuck there, and they're part of the reason that Russia actually is in Ukraine in the first place.
There's definitely something weird going on with the Azovstal thing because, as you guys talked about, I think it was last week or something. I forgot what I was going to say. Anyway, Putin, he held off and said, no, we're not going to bomb the crap out of it because there are civilians, right? And so then, okay, the humanitarian corridors, no, we won't let them go. Video that comes out from inside, and then all of a sudden, I think it was like last week. I can't remember which person who announced it first, but they said, "Oh, we'll let all the civilians out, right?" Mm-hmm. And there's photos of civilians coming out, and they said, "Oh, women and children," but there was a photo of a man escorting a little girl. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, both Ukraine and Russia said there are no more civilians in Azovstal.
Right. Yeah.
Now, why the heck would... I mean, Putin held off, so that means that, right, Ukraine would lie and say, no, there are still civilians there, mm-hmm. Don't bomb Russia, right? But they were like, yeah, there are no more civilians there.
Yeah.
So there's something really weird going on there. Well, I don't know if it's a secret underground lab and all that stuff, but something's going on.
They got a few dozens of civilians. First of all, they said there were thousands in there and stuff. Obviously bullshit. It was, a few dozen, and they got out.
They said 181 total or something.
But they got out under the auspices of the International Red Cross or the UN or whatever, right? So it's possible that anybody who was worth anything to them snuck out as civilians, and but that's one thing the Russians said they didn't want to happen. But anyway, we don't know.
I saw a report just before coming here. Sputnik reports, actually it cites the Daily Express in the UK today, saying that there are at least they know of another 3 British servicemen.
Just servicemen. Yeah.
So they have fought in Afghanistan. They've been on tours of duty under the British Army in Afghanistan, are currently still in Azovstal. Mm. So there's a lot more. I think it's probably got to do with certain figures. Remember the rumors about the missing, unknown whereabouts of that major colonel
Yeah,
from the
American.
U.S. Army. So
Yeah.
there might be some senior people, or
And they don't want the Russians
just
getting...
basically the basic setup. They don't want they don't want the Russians to have the information coup of showing whatever the setup was.
Mhm.
You know,
But this links to what we're saying to the other event that happened just yesterday as well, which was it's funny how you link Eurovision to a mass shooting in America, in Buffalo. But anyway, so a young guy, 18 years old, in Buffalo yesterday went into a mall and shot 10 people. 8 of them, I think, were black, and everybody's agreeing that it was a racially motivated attack. Just killed 10 people in a shop, in a supermarket, and but he, as is often the case in these kind of white supremacist or racially motivated shootings by white people, they have a manifesto, right? So if you just bring up heavy.com, so there's, he videoed the whole thing more or less. If you scroll down, scroll down. There's a manifesto, part of the manifesto. Go up a little bit, actually. Go back up there. So he says, okay. Oh, no, sorry. Keep going. Sorry. Keep going down. Sorry, downwards. It reads a bit, I think it's here.
The manifesto states.
Yeah.
yeah, that's exactly how the Tarrant fella had his written out, question and answer.
Right, the Tarrant fella being...
The Christchurch shooter,
right,
in 2019.
And this guy is a kind of supposedly a copycat type thing of the...
Yeah, the manifesto, I haven't read it myself, but allegedly it's being reported that it explicitly cites him as inspiration.
Yeah.
And links back to that nutter in Norway in 2011.
Yeah, so he says, it's almost like the manifesto states, why did you decide to carry out this attack? Imagine you're writing a manifesto and you ask yourself questions so you can answer them. It's like a formula, a form that you fill in. Is there a form that somebody produces for, mass shooters? Please fill in this form and let us know what your motivation are. Why did you decide to carry out the attack? To show the replacers that as long as the white man lives, our land will never be theirs and they will never be safe from us. To directly reduce immigration rates to European lands by immigration rates to European lands by intimidating and physically removing their replacers. This is some American guy worried about
Buffalo, upstate New York,
worried about immigration in Europe. To intimidate the replacers already living on our lands, to agitate the political enemies of my people into action, to incite violence, retaliation, and further divide between European people and the replacers currently occupying European soil. It sounds like something that the Americans would really love to see happen. I mean, the American government, that is. I think there was a part where he says, just above that in the non-quoted paragraph, so they're quoting from it in the article there. It says, it continues, this crisis of mass immigration and just one paragraph above, it continues, the crisis of mass immigration and sub-replacement fertility. I think it's one above that, Scotty. There you go, right there. The crisis of mass immigration and sub-replacement fertility is an assault on the European people that, if not combated, will ultimately result in the complete racial and cultural replacement of the European people. The manifesto, which refers to white genocide, contains a name and says that's the guy's name. His name is Grandin. His surname is Grandin.
Peyton Grandin.
Peyton Grandin. Anyway,
what a name.
Contains a name and says that the author is 18 years old as of writing this. So this is written by him, supposedly. Think about this being written by a single person.
Yeah.
So it talks about what genocide is, and it says that the author, so you're writing this, and you're saying, the author of this is 18 years old as of writing this. I am the sole perpetrator of the recent attempted mass shooting.
I have to let you know that.
Why would you write? I am the just FYI. I am the sole perpetrator. In case anybody thinks that there's anybody else involved here, why that would bother me, I don't know. But I just want to make it clear: I am the sole perpetrator.
I had no handlers.
I had nobody helping me. I lived in Southern Tier, New York, all my life. Blah blah blah. I believe I am ethnically white, since my parents' nationalities are the North European, from northwestern Europe and Italy. I graduated high school, blah, blah, blah. I'm not a warfighter, nor have I been enrolled in any military or tactical training, FYI. I have no connections with the military or any security apparatus in America, so excuse any mistakes I make during my attack because I don't have my handlers with me. I mean, I was never diagnosed with a mental disability or disorder, and I believe to be perfectly sane.
Yeah.
It even talks about his personality type.
It sounds like someone is trying really hard to
Set it up in a certain frame it in a
to
certain way.
clarify that, you know, the ideology has reality to it. You know, that he's not mentally insane.
Right.
When he is clearly nuts. You know.
Yeah, for
Of course
sure.
he's nuts.
So, a couple of things about this actually. You mentioned the guy Tarrant. So he modelled himself, and he even said that he modelled himself on the Christchurch shooter in New Zealand, who shot up a mosque 5 or 6 years ago, or 4 or 5 years ago.
I think it's only 3 years ago. It's 2019.
Right. Well, the interesting thing is you put up the New York Times. This is from NewYorkTimes.jpg. This is from the New York Times at the time of that shooting in Christchurch, New Zealand, which the Buffalo guy modelled his, attack on, his manifesto on. And the New York Times mentioned that the Christchurch shooter, on his flak jacket, was a symbol commonly used by the Azov Battalion, a Ukrainian neo-Nazi paramilitary organization, the ones that are in the Azovstal plant.
Good
that,
Nazis.
That
Yeah.
the band, the Ukrainian entry
Yeah.
to Eurovision, just said that we should all try and save.
And
So
everyone
follow
went,
the
"Yay."
links here, right?
Yeah.
So that's from the guy on his flak jacket was a symbol. That's the guy in New Zealand, the Christchurch shooter in New Zealand, that this guy in Buffalo modelled his manifesto on. Now go to the JPEG Grend in Ukraine. This is the guy who did the shooting in Buffalo yesterday. That's the same symbol that the New York Times just mentioned is commonly used by the Azov Battalion, who are holed up in the Azovstal plant. And that Ukrainian soldier that US tax dollars have just shelled out, or taxpayers have just shelled out another 40 billion, thanks to their government, too. And he's also wearing the same neo-Nazi or Nazi, it's actually a Nazi symbol, the black sun they call it, and it's a Nazi emblem.
Son and Rad.
Yeah. So, I don't know, put that all together and it suggests that there's a whole web, dark webs where these shooters are groomed or whatever, or got help and all that kind of stuff, and these kind of emblems, the black sun and other symbols or symbolism would be used. But the strange thing is that you've got a lot of Ukrainian soldiers, particularly of the Azov Battalion, who have been sporting, and there's plenty of video or plenty of images you can see over the past 2 or 3 months, pictures taken by Western media stuff showing Ukrainian military personnel with that emblem on their flak jackets or shirts.
The one on the right there was blasted everywhere.
That was from the BBC,
That was
BBC
all
News.
BBC. So can we say at the very least that he was radicalized by the media?
You can.
Except he himself would dispute it. Because included in the manifesto was an express statement, I have it here from CNN. The manifesto's author attributes the internet for his beliefs. Now, imagine you're an 18-year-old in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
What 18-year-old goes, I would like to make the distinction to say that all of my beliefs come from the internet.
Yeah.
They don't see the world as the internet versus the media.
No.
They just know the internet.
Yeah.
That sounds like a boomer wrote that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What
what he was radicalized by, he claims he was radicalized by the internet, he got all his information from the internet, but what on the internet, or rather, who on the internet? Because you throw up the New York Times, this again from 2012, and it's just a little reminder. You just have to stop it, Scotty, so we can see a little bit of the text. Yeah, good. You may not remember this, but you should remember it, because this was actually carried repeatedly by different mainstream media outlets, after people like us had been talking about it for many years beforehand. Terrorist plots hatched by the FBI. This is New York Times. The United States has been narrowly saved from lethal terrorist plots in recent years, or so it seemed. A would-be suicide bomber was intercepted on his way to the capital. A scheme to bomb synagogues and shoot Stinger missiles at military aircraft was developed by men in Newburgh, New York. And a fanciful idea to fly explosion-laden model planes into the Pentagon and the capital was hatched in Massachusetts. But all these dramas were facilitated by the FBI, whose undercover agents and informers posed as terrorists, offering a dummy missile, fake C4 explosives, a disarmed suicide vest, and rudimentary training. Suspects naively played their parts until they were arrested. So this is a reality. You know, I mean, we know it's a reality because we've looked at it in much more depth over the years, but even the New York Times and other mainstream media outlets have had to admit that this is a reality. So, and the likelihood is, and in fact, I know for sure in several of these FBI plots, the people involved who were the terrorists who were eventually caught, quote unquote, were contacted first on the internet by people working for the FBI, posing as white supremacists, Al-Qaeda members, swore them in with Al-Qaeda oaths and all that kind of stuff. So the point of saying all this is to put a big question mark over this recent shooting in Buffalo and who's actually behind it, in the sense of who groomed this guy, who's very likely groomed or had some kind of help, and the fact that he's, you know, sporting a neo-Nazi symbol on his jacket when he's doing the shooting and pledges allegiance to kind of or espouses neo-Nazi right-wing, extreme right-wing white supremacist values, and is sporting a symbol, a neo-Nazi symbol that has also been worn by the Ukrainian military. So basically the link I'm making here is that some part of the apparatus of the American state, of the American government, overt or covert, has its hands directly, very likely directly involved with foisting neo-Nazi ideology on certain individuals in America, and actively supporting people who openly have neo-Nazi ideology in Ukraine and giving them billions of dollars. There's a tie-in to...
We know for sure that Ukrainians were being taken over to the US for training.
Right.
We also know that I think there are a number of instances where Ukrainians who've been instrumental in the Maidan popped up at places like the Capitol on January 6th.
Right.
Likely agents provocateurs, you know?
Yeah. Throw up the Twitter link. I think it's the only one I have, is it? Yeah. Here's John Kirby openly admitting something.
We should know is the training and effort that went into getting the Ukrainians ready for this kind of war over the last 8 years. The United States, Canada, Britain, other allies really helped train the Ukrainians in small unit leadership, command and control, operational maneuver, the kinds of things you're seeing them do now. It's not just about the weapons. It's about the skills and the capabilities that they and the leadership that they're exerting on the battlefield. And that wasn't by accident. They really have transformed from a Soviet era, very Russian dominant sort of military, very top-down, rigid, doctrinal military, to one that's much more Western-aligned in terms of the way they think and act and actually encourage initiative on the battlefield. Again, that wasn't an accident. That was the work of the United States and so many other allies over.
Mainly the United States. Over the last 8 years, he said, we have been training the Ukrainian military for this kind of war. We've been training them for this specific conflict for the last 8 years.
Yeah.
But it all just happened because Putin invaded Ukraine just 3 months ago, right?
Yeah, out of the blue. For no reason whatsoever. Just because he's an evil dictator.
Yeah. The fact that, as Kirby just admitted, America had been actively training the Ukrainian military for this kind of war, i.e. a war against Russia. So the US, Kirby, Pentagon spokesman, admits that the Pentagon has been training the Ukrainian military for 8 years for a war with Russia. Has nothing to do with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Right?
Nothing whatsoever.
Okay. As long as we have that clear, then we're fine. Let's move on.
And the Nazi in Buffalo, New York has nothing whatsoever to do with the heroes of Azov style.
No.
Well, I suppose they would say, well, what's the matter, Joe? Can't you hold two conflicting ideas in your head simultaneously?
What if they're the same ideas? Then I can hold them even better.
The issue here is the moral matrix. Who's good and who's bad in this situation? I mean, obviously, anyone going and killing 10 people in a supermarket is bad. No one would dispute that. And whatever his motivations or what he thought his motivations were,
18 years old.
he's nuts.
Come on.
He's 18. The interesting thing about his hero, Brenton Tarrant, is that he was traveling the world dozens of times over 4 years before he did what he did in New Zealand. The New Zealand authorities have issued a final report, a Royal Commission report on what happened. It's a hell of a list of countries he went to. It says send it across the Scott here. In 4 years, he went to something like 70 countries. Most people young globetrotters don't get around
Struggle
that
to
much.
get that, yeah.
Holy moly. He went to, among other places, North Korea, at least once, Eastern Europe. He also went to Ukraine. Brenton Tarrant is confirmed was in Ukraine for a month in 2015.
Oh yeah, right when the war and
It was theorized for a while, and then it was kind of, oh, shut up, but that's not actually confirmed. It is now confirmed in the final report where he traveled and what he did, and you'll probably have to do a search. The list is, scroll down, show people how long this list is. It's Southeast Asia, East Asia, multiple
China,
times,
Philippines,
China, Central,
Armenia?
Kyrgyzstan, Armenia, Ukraine. For 1 month, followed by a week in Russia.
Yeah, India, Iran. Wow.
Then he's going back home, back
He was doing
to
a tour-
China, Nepal,
he was doing-
Turkey, Greece.
He's doing a tour of the CIA bases of the world.
Back into Eastern Europe, Hungary, UAE, Israel. Scroll up a bit there. We have a look at Israel. How long was he in Israel? For
A week?
about 10 days
10 days, yeah.
in 2016.
Wow.
Elsewhere in the Middle East.
Well-travelled young man.
Oh, that's over 4 years. That's just 2016 you're looking at. It goes on and on. Scroll all the way down to the map that gives you an idea of how far this lone gunman working totally on his own traveled the world in 4 years.
And never met anybody who he might have... who might have maybe encouraged him or put him up to it, or...
I couldn't find it in time for the show, but something dodgy happened a couple of years ago where there was a scandal in Austria. It's the one that made the government fall, where there was a honey trap, and the vice chancellor got caught talking to someone posing as a Russian heiress. She
Right.
wasn't. She was a plant.
Well, she wanted favourable coverage in the media
Yeah,
for
for
Russia,
Russia,
in exchange for
Contracts.
investment.
Yeah. And he fell, and it took the whole government down with it. An interesting thing in the middle of that was that the British intelligence couldn't help but pipe up to let the Austrians know that because, well, it was a kind of a stick to help the process along for the government to fall. Just prior to him falling, they said, we're going to have to remove Austria from this list of select countries that get special intelligence. For example, we have special information here about the Christchurch shooting and the fact that he visited Austria, So we're just letting you know that this special information will be withheld from you until someone in Austria, behind the scenes, makes the right decision. And then you'll be let back into this club of secret special intelligence.
Moves away from Russia, basically.
So,
Or becomes antagonistic
it
towards
doesn't
Russia.
matter what exactly the point is. They were sending a message to someone in the know high up in Austria that you're out of this club that involves special information about people who carry out massacres of Muslims the far side of the world, halfway to almost in Antarctica, ostensibly as a white supremacist.
And it can happen anywhere, and we have the information on it, and we may or may not share that with you. So
Depending on how you behave politically.
because we organize,
It was
because we organize
rank
it.
internal interference in, obviously, affairs of a small country, and it involved something that shouldn't. The media said it was just a white supremacist Nazi who decided to go massacre a bunch of Muslims.
Well, this guy in Buffalo is not just a white supremacist Nazi who decided to go and kill some black people in Buffalo in America. Put up the Buffalo JPEG. You'll be shocked to see this, Neil. I want to see the shock on your face when you read this one.
It's hard to shock me these days, Joe. Insider, Russia could strike back at the West by calling on its network of white supremacist groups to commit terror attacks there, analysts warn. Hang on, let me reread that in my head.
Russia's going. Russia.
Oh, there being the West, so
Yes.
Russia could actually.
Russia did yesterday, quite possibly, in Buffalo.
Oh, I see where
This
they're
guy
going. Yeah.
that we're suggesting, based on evidence and past form, was probably groomed by some element of the
Western network.
American establishment, was actually groomed by Russians, and they're doing this as asymmetric warfare against America.
Interesting
They're
that
trying to
they-
bring down America.
Interesting that
by
they-
inciting civil war.
They don't mind the method being articulated clearly in headlines,
Of course.
so long as it's projected
Well, that's the whole.
onto.
Remember conspiracy theories?
Yeah.
Or sorry, false flags.
Yeah,
False flags that John Kirby talked about. Or no, it wasn't John Kirby. It was one of his friends.
yeah.
And talked about false flags. Russia going to carry out false flags.
Jake Sullivan or something.
False flags are normal. They happen, but only when carried out by Russia.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's so predictable. That headline is so predictable. Like I mean, obviously I wasn't shocked, although I am a little bit surprised sometimes when they are so flagrant about it. So crass in pointing the finger. Rather than
Yeah.
looking in the mirror type thing.
How do you actually say Russia has a network of white supremacist groups that are going to commit terrorist acts when all over the media, including like the BBC and mainstream,
It's Trump's
you
fault.
there's dudes with freaking Nazi symbols on their uniforms. Even the Western media has said point blank, the Christchurch shooter, Ukrainian neo-Nazi Azov Battalion. Everyone knows the Azov Battalion. Everyone sees the photos. Everyone see. What did you see? A Russian with a Nazi symbol on there?
Two words: dynamic narratives.
But it's like,
It's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy. Trying to
We make up stuff.
square this circle.
They make
like-
up stuff as they go along.
They
It can just flip it on its head from one week to the next. But what happened last year, what we said last year, what was true last year is no longer true if it doesn't fit the narrative.
and not only that, but John Kirby says, yeah, for the past 8 years, we're funding them,
We've been planning to have a war with Russia, is what
and
he
we've been
said,
planning to have a war, and
via Ukraine.
I have some follow up here.
Yeah, it
Possibly
does
some more data
break
that
your
will
head.
flesh out this idea of international networking. This is from an Australian news report about Brenton Tarrant, I think at the time or
Christchurch.
shortly after the Christchurch shooter. Can you scroll down to the sub-headline, The False Trail?
There's that map.
Not the map, no. The training.
There you
Yeah,
go.
here we go. Okay, so let's have a look at
Oh, we're
this.
not going back to Breivik, are we?
Well, no, it's worth bringing up because
No, but I mean, it's crazy
the
that they
way
make it.
the way the connections are made with carefully placed information in the media. Remember, these guys don't say jack; they do the thing, and then they're
Silence.
voiceless thereafter.
Yeah.
The only thing that speaks for them is a manifesto found somewhere and anonymously given to CNN, etc.
Yeah, that they filled in.
That they filled in a form
Apparently.
somewhere. The false trail. Okay, so this is, remember, 2019, 2020, looking back at 2011 massacre in Norway. A copy of Oslo terrorist Breivik's manifesto was found on an SD memory card associated with the Christchurch Brenton Tarrant's drone. The commission believed the Christchurch shooter was significantly influenced by the Oslo terrorist, finding similarities in his preparation, bulking up, joining a rifle club, etc. When interviewed by police, Brenton Tarrant referred to the reborn Knights Templar. I know, it sounds
yeah.
loony, but it's the placing of this looniness that's interesting. He also said in his manifesto he received a blessing from the Oslo terrorists through his brother Knights for his attack. The Knights Templar Order International had a knighting ceremony in Wrocław in Poland on December 15, 2018.
And I
Tarrant
did
was
something.
in Poland that day, but the maximum time he could have been in Wrocław was very precise, isn't it? They know exactly where he was. 1 hour and 21 minutes. There was no evidence he attended the meeting. Okay, let's scroll. This is the most interesting part. He, Tarrant, said the reference was a red herring authorities were, quote, supposed to follow, but not eat the damn thing. Okay, this is someone else speaking now. The purpose was to add apparent credibility to his otherwise not very plausible narrative that he had received international support for his planned attack, and consequently prompt unnecessary official inquiry, describing it as an elaborate trolling exercise. Now, what they're suggesting here in this 9 News report is that this is all concocted as an elaborate trolling exercise by Brenton Tarrant. I would suggest that he is in some way directed or placed sheep dip to be in Wrocław at the time of this supposed meeting, so that the connection can be made and so that such information contrived, if you like, can be fed to international intelligence agencies when they share and meet up at the secret clubs as something real, something hard, something tangible to use. But once it's actually put out in the light of day, it's like, hang on a second, he would have been in the city for an hour. He couldn't possibly have actually gone there. But the placing of him there is supposed to, it's a false trail. And in a sense, it's the creation of a false network. Or rather, it's diabolical because in a sense, they're saying, yes, there's a network. But we've covered it with a false flag.
They're putting it in the mouth of people like him, who and it's immediately discredited because it's in his mouth because he's presented as a crazy person, right?
And so people reading go, oh, the reborn Knights Templar, okay, whatever. But it wasn't the Knights Templar he was talking to.
The Knights Templar were a bunch of Satanists, basically, kind of like neo-Nazis today.
Right, back in yonder.
So it's
in
appropriate.
medieval
It's an appropriate
times. It's an
reference.
appropriate reference, but the person he's talking to doesn't actually see himself as such. The person he's talking to is a brother in the sense that he's been groomed. It's a handler of some type. What's his name? Breivik had the same thing in his manifesto. He even posed for photographs that somebody took of him in full garb. Freemasonic garb is one, like scuba gear and harpoon is another, and a third is some kind of Templar symbol on his suit or something. So whoever he's talking to gets him to believe he's just joined a secret society.
Kind of like
Templar
Al-Qaeda
Reborn.
or Al-Qaeda.
Yeah. But
Similar.
in fact, like Al-Qaeda, it's actually just a database of useful idiots.
Right.
You
And
can manipulate.
and the person swearing you into this secret society is an FBI informant or other intelligence agency informant.
Yeah, one of the alphabet soup.
Yeah. That works, people.
Interestingly, later in 2020, I'm going to send this one to Scott as well. It's an interesting follow-up because this shows kind of how things can go in two directions. So, you know, is Tarrant, is it his going to Ukraine that radicalized them or vice versa? Well, it's a dynamic situation. This is a report from 2020. No one obviously paid attention to it because of what was going on at the time. Headline, Sydney Morning Herald, Ukraine, so the Ukrainian government, raids houses of neo-Nazi followers of Christchurch shooter. Why the hell? Why would they do that? And, well, the SBU, that's our friend, our friends, whatever, the Ukrainian intelligence service, raiding premises of people they believe linked to. Maybe they did meet this guy, maybe they didn't. Maybe they just liked his stuff and were saying similar things on the internet. But think about it.
You know what?
What we know of Ukraine now, why would people having sympathy for Tarrant or anyone like him stand out in Ukraine? Someone decided to make arrests in Ukraine for a specific reason. And it wasn't to do with wearing Sonnenrads or expressing support for killing Untermensch because, well, look at Ukraine today. That's totally kosher, right?
Yeah, neo-Nazi followers. A lot of it, internet is responsible for all of this, really, because it wouldn't really be possible in the way that it is without the internet. And, you know, intel agencies of Western governments in particular are running, you know, on 4chan or 8chan or subreddits, whatever, dedicated specifically to grooming, finding people, you know, because I mean that headline said followers of Tarrant.
Yeah.
So there's people on there like gullible teenagers basically who are, for whatever, you know, because of their personality types or their upbringing or whatever, are, you know, predisposed to that kind of viewpoint just because they want to act up, maybe a lot of them, and it's like taking candy from a baby for members of intel agencies to effectively groom them and find the right ones and take them along to certain and organize meets and all that kind of stuff. You know, there's so much of that stuff going on the internet anyway on other topics. It's so easy to have one that's dedicated to militant, right-wing, save the white race kind of, you know, ideologies or beliefs or whatever, and get people involved in it. It's it really is child's play, you know. Yeah. So anyway, it was an interesting series of connections there. I think anyway, between the whole thing, and it points to an overarching, controlling hand in the whole thing, really. You know, and like we were talking about the other day, there's some people who can accept that based on the evidence and the fact that it maps to reality and explains a lot of the holes and you know, the whys for all of these things, or the hows for all of these kind of attacks and different things. It explains it in a much more coherent way than anybody else or anything else. You know what I mean? Because there is no other explanation.
Yeah.
Or any other explanation simply doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's some dude who's travelled all around the world and somehow managed to go into a mosque in New Zealand, for example, in Christchurch, and kill
51 people.
with no training, and kill 51 people. And the way, you know, all of these anomalies in terms of like what we just talked about with Buffalo shooter, who like apparently filling in a form saying, I was the only one who did this. Please remember, I was the only one who carried out this attack.
And I was only informed by the internet. Like an 18-year-old today just doesn't say that.
Right.
I really think that's...
Yeah, written for him. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, there's a lot of discrepancies and holes in this in these kind of stories, in these events, and the only thing that really explains them, and it's logical, it's rational, except that it poses a pretty horrible picture of how certain sections of Western intelligence agencies operate, and what their agenda is, and what they do to people, and what their agenda is. In terms of facilitating these kind of, like we said, New York Times FBI terror plots facilitated by the FBI would not have happened without the FBI effectively doing them. Expand that out to other intel agencies and and other events.
And those who can't go there, so to speak, they, in a sense, the one thing that's left open to them is what we've seen, and what is encouraged, of course, by the media, is to go with, well, okay, these Nazis are heroes. Because otherwise it's like, hang on, if they're Nazis, Hitler, evil, Germany, my government's supporting them. Wait, my government's actually giving them everything to do Nazi-like things, very much, really torture, barbaric stuff. No, can't go there. So instead, I'm going to be offered the circus of, and I should support them and cheer for them. I'll just go with that.
Supporting
the brain. It's easier for the brain to cheer and dance.
Yeah, and think it's all
with
good.
Nazis than it is
to realize the implications of
how evil their government is.
Yeah, well, they already took the Western populations there with Al Qaeda and Syria. Al Qaeda carried out the 9/11 attacks. They were the arch enemy, the arch evil, and they turned the various Al Qaeda linked groups and ISIS linked groups in Syria into heroes of the resistance fighting against the evil Assad. So people have already gone there.
Yeah. This is one step further down. This is one step further down to the Lake of Fire, though, where this is like Al Qaeda wins Eurovision Song Contest,
right? And
everyone cheers,
right,
and dances.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, it's going there. It's by degrees. It's 1 degree further.
It's 1 degree further
down.
It's a slow process. What Lavrov said this week. I like this term, and he's not being hyperbolic. It's the precise term to use. It's a continued moral degradation of the West.
Yeah,
and moral is important because from it, everything else. If your values are wrong or getting messed up, you're going to end up trying to square a circle that is impossible to do so. And so your only choice left for your brain, rather than try to compete with the stress it gives you, is to just go along with it, to celebrate it, and to vote up the Azov Battalion. And I mean, Zelensky says he has announced after Ukraine has won the Eurovision that it's going to be held in Mariupol next year. I'm like, it's brilliant. They can be held at the Azovstal,
Yeah, in the bunkers. Yeah. But that, I thought that was actually funny when he said that. I mean, it's just pure crass, talking complete shit, basically. Like just not unashamedly talking shit, like talking stuff up as if it's, rah, let's do it. Totally divorced from reality. And the likely outcome is there's, Mariupol is already part of Russia. Ukraine is not going to have the Eurovision Song Contest next year in fucking Mariupol. Has had. Jesus Christ.
Cocaine, baby. Cocaine.
Yeah.
Anything is possible.
Although they did on that Eurovision Song Contest, I think the presenter, they have a presenter from each of the countries. The presenter for Ukraine was in a bunker.
I saw a photo. I didn't believe
Nancy
it.
Pelosi, who was the latest guy, the Republicans who went.
Oh, Mitch McConnell went
Mitch
this week.
McConnell, and then before that, Lindsey
The
Graham
dotard.
and Pelosi and all that swan around Kiev, right? Staying in plush hotels, walking around the streets, shaking hands, all that kind of stuff. They can do that a week ago, but this week for the European Eurovision Song Contest, the presenter from Ukraine has to be in a bunker because of the air raids.
Right.
He's obviously in Kiev, right? That's the capital. That's where he's broadcasting from, but he's in a bunker and clearly with bunker walls behind him, let's say. And that level of propaganda is just like, I mean, how stupid do you have to be? If you believe it already, if you're actively preemptively believing that stuff, then yeah, it probably works for you. But if you've got a small amount of your bullshit detector is functioning even at a minimal level, surely that you go, dude, really? I mean, you don't need to be involved. Nancy Pelosi was whatever. If you can't understand it, forget about it.
Traveler Ryan asks an important question.
Yeah.
He says, what happens if the state that wins the Eurovision Song Contest no longer exists the following year?
It goes to the nearest country.
That would be
that'll be Russia.
That would be unprecedented. That would be the first time that happened. It'd be interesting to.
Good question. Write into the European Broadcasting Union and ask them what their bylaw for that is. That thing about it could never be political. It's another symptom of the West, and it shows the degrees to which things are degrading as well. Like 2014 went political. And it's interesting. On the surface, it had nothing to do with the coup in Kiev and then the retaking of Crimea and the launch of civil war in Donbass. It was just that there was this very strange character who won. And 2 years later, Ukraine won. And in this case, it was more like a normal song. But the song was about the deportation of Crimean Tatars back in 1944. Mm-hmm. Of course, completely, and the sort of not so subtle reference was, poor Ukraine, Russia evil, then Russia evil, today Russia evil, forever kind of thing. Of course, left out of the context was, I'm not suggesting Stalin had the right idea when he started moving people around, but he did that because of the scale of collaboration of a large number of them with the Nazi regime in the slaughter of all kinds of everyone else in Crimea and Ukraine at the time. So that it's okay. You bleach that fact, and otherwise it looks fine. But year by year, things degrade to the point where we're having a much more direct conflict, east and west. At this point, it's no longer just a civil war in Donbass. Mm-hmm. The symbols are far more in your face. The tattoos, the things Ukrainians get up to versus Russians in this war. And it's like, we're not talking about theoretical things that were or were not done in 1944, people. Mm-hmm. At this point, you're choosing to align your moral position with in-your-face torture and stuff like that, And it's not looking good. It's not looking good for people. I mean, Jesus, it was almost 20 years since, we're worried about the fate of people just accepting torture post 9/11, Well, now they get the videos and everything, and they're still told to cheer,
right,
for that side. It's kind of...
I nearly fell off my chair today because there was I didn't actually read the article in French on Le Monde, but there was an article on Le Monde that was, they had independent analysts, blah, 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 confirming the video of when the Ukrainian soldiers were shooting the Russian captives in the leg. And they said, yes, this is accurate. It's a humanitarian crisis. It's against the Geneva Conventions, blah, blah, blah. And this is Le Monde, which is like mainstream French newspaper. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, a shocking bit of...
it's not wall to wall. It's not complete,
No, it was a shocking... that's what shocks me these days, is not the stuff like, Russia is behind the mass shooting events, white supremacist mass shooting events in America. It's whenever I see the Western media admitting something that is obviously true and has been true for quite a long time, actually admitting that it's true. That's what just knocks me off my seat. I'm like, whoa. mind blown. You know,
Whenever a sliver of light gets through.
famine.
Oh, but just before that, did you see that there was an Israeli Azov member?
Yeah, yeah.
He put out an appeal. It was aired. Twitter's removed it, though. I can't show it to you anymore. But obviously, that's like, okay, no, delete.
Yeah.
We won't even, just delete it.
Won't even try and justify that one, yeah, or explain that. Yeah. Well, it goes back to what Lavrov said, right? That some of the biggest, most ardent anti-Semites were Jewish, or are Jewish.
Yeah, does that mean that Putin has to unapologize now?
Yeah. No, Putin should just shut up and.
Famine. What do you want to talk about famine?
Well, I just sent it to Scotty there.
Russia's Black Sea blockade pushing millions towards famine, G7 says. Yay.
Foreign ministers called for action to allow export of Ukrainian grain as Kiev claims Russian withdrawal from second largest city. Millions of people will starve to death unless Russia allows the export of Ukrainian grain from blockaded ports. The G7 government said the Russian president was pushing 43 million people towards famine. You see, there's no end. We thought that over the past 10 years or so, the demonization of Putin as a baby killer and as a chemical weapons poisoner of innocent people with chemical weapons, the Skripals, all that kind of stuff, shooting down of planes, blah 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 blah, was the worst. It can go further. I used to think, well, they've said everything bad that anybody could possibly say about another person, about Putin, but maybe not. Genocidal maniac. He's up there with Pol Pot. 43 million people. You may see claims or articles or reports or statements by Western media and politicians over the next year or two where they directly blame Putin for killing 43 million people or more.
Yeah. At that G7 meeting, the German foreign minister characterized this as Russia made a conscious decision to turn the war against Ukraine into a grain war. This, she alleges, is now affecting a wide range of states, especially in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
We must not be naive about this, she warns. It's not collateral damage. It's a perfectly deliberate instrument in a hybrid war.
Right.
Someone else called it, I can't remember who, a global holodomor. You know what that term is?
Holodomor, yep. Yeah.
That's a loaded term, of course.
Stalin, supposedly, did it.
Stalin, yeah, it's revisionist history. It's become the new revised history in which Stalin caused this mass famine in Ukraine in the early 1930s. But completely bleached is the global context that there was global famine at the time, the early 30s. Like, for example, in the United States, there are something like there's a population glitch in censuses from 1930 to 1940 in the United States, and no one has ever figured out what happened. The only obvious solution to it is that there's about 10 million people. Well, no, it's been revised down. It's about 7 million people.
Yeah,
who died in famine conditions in the Great Depression in the U.S. Anyway, I point that out because that was global in nature. But in this revising of history, the Holodomor today, it's no longer a structural agency is ascribed to it, and it's Stalin and it's Russia and it's
well, history repeats, right? The revising of history that is going on about the Holodomor is happening. So it was revised after the fact, right? And it's being kind of sort of corrected, at least in some circles now, that, like you just said, it wasn't as bad as they said, and there was a global food crisis or crop failure, basically. Well, that's actually happening now, but
agency
the revising of it is happening much quicker and can happen much quicker.
Yeah.
because of the internet and the speed of information, all that kind of stuff. If you just put up that article we're just looking at, Scotty, from the Guardian, just go down under the picture, a few paragraphs under the picture of those boats at the.
Oh, I need to register to keep
just
reading.
say I'll do it later. Underneath, yeah.
Ah,
Just go down to the picture of boats, and then past him. Don't stop at him. Oh no, sorry. No, maybe it's a boat. Sorry. It's actually near the top. Sorry.
ah.
So under the ad, at the very bottom there, Russia's unprovoked and premeditated war of aggression has exacerbated the global economic outlook with sharply rising food, fuel and energy prices, the G7 said in a joint statement. So they're basically, as far as the average person is concerned, blaming Russia for all of these problems. Except for this, so you gotta check around and not just take one story as the truth. This is from the Economic Times of India. From India to France, wheat crops are coming under threat everywhere. So we just heard that Russia is to blame for the potentially for the death of 43 million people through famine because they're blockading, and we don't know if that's true, they're blockading Black Sea ports to ship out wheat. Of course, the West has said they're doing it by rail, so it's not a problem. They're getting wheat out of Ukraine where they can by rail. So you take that with a grain of salt. But the real problem is this. India, France, wheat crops are coming under threat everywhere. As Russia's invasion, again, they can't help but
add that in
at the beginning. Droughts, but the second paragraph, droughts, flooding and heat waves threaten output from the US to France and India. Compounding shrinking production in Ukraine. Now, I think Ukraine produces...
It's number one exporter or producer.
Exporter of something. No, it's something like Russia is number one exporter.
Yeah.
Ukraine is 10%, I think, about 10% of the world's wheat, right? But if you include US, France, and India doesn't actually export very much at all. If anything, of wheat, it keeps pretty much all of it for its own population. And yesterday, India, it was kind of weird. They said that they're banning all wheat exports, but they hardly export any wheat at all. A little bit, but they need whatever little amount that they export. They need it because they're having a very bad, serious drought and serious heat wave just over the past few months. So the planting and growing of wheat right now is not going very well, let's say. Same in France, same in the US, and same in several other countries. So
why in France? Because it's too damn hot.
Yes.
Right.
So, and not lack of rain. So that's the reality, but they put it all on Russia's doorstep, right?
Right.
And then, of course, in the Guardian article, they mentioned gas prices, right? And fuel prices. But if you just go to the RT article, Scotty, again, if you just look around, Joe Biden, or the Biden administration, I should say, because Joe Biden doesn't do very much. The Biden administration has just this week cancelled oil lease sales despite the fuel crisis. So they cancelled 3 offshore oil and natural gas lease sales, including one in Alaska, diminishing prospects for new resources of supply, even as record gasoline prices help keep the US inflation rate at a 40-year high. So as gas prices are high and there's, a kind of a shortage, a manufactured shortage in the sense of, at least nominally or officially, Western countries not buying Russian oil, and therefore there's a supply problem or a lack of oil, at least, and gas, possibly in the near future, for European countries. The Biden administration is shutting off domestic production, potential domestic production, i.e. there's just, and the reason they say it is that there's, they said basically that there was no interest. There was a lack of, they said for a lack of interest, but they themselves, because of their policies of shutting down oil, screwing up the oil market basically by messing with it, by embargoing Russian oil and all that kind of stuff, make it much less attractive for potential investors to actually extract oil, because they're trying to mothball oil basically.
Right.
Which fits with the whole green agenda, right? That's what they want to do. That's what we've been hearing for years. Climate change, et cetera, global warming. We need to stop using fossil fuels. Well, they're actually seem to be in the process of consciously and deliberately trying to shut down the supply of fossil fuels, like over in a very short period of time,
Yeah.
leading to what? The deaths of millions, or starvation of millions of people. That is already a problem because of actual climate change. That, again, the climate change issue is about whether or not it's man-made and whether or not shutting down fossil fuels will actually help climate change. They effectively would be linking, for example, the drought, the heat waves in France, and the problems in the US. Crop production in the US, in France, in India, and in other countries. They link that to climate change caused by humans, but it's not caused by humans. But they pretend it is anyway and justify. But again, they're not even justifying the shutting down, as we've seen. They're not even justifying the mothballing of fossil fuel production and therefore consumption anymore so much because of man-made global warming. Now they switch to Russia. It's almost like that wasn't tenable, or it wasn't working fast enough. It wasn't convincing the population fast enough. So we got to do it more directly. We got to cut it off directly ourselves. We can't expect people to get on board with the kind of like, yes, the climate's warming and we're causing the destruction of the planet. We need to stop using fossil fuels. Everybody's like, yeah, but it doesn't seem so bad out there. And stopping using fossil fuels would be really hard because what are we going to replace them with? We don't have anything really practical to replace them with. So the governments appear to be in the process of saying, well, you know what? We'll just shut them down anyway. Yeah. But under the guise of evil Russian aggression in Ukraine. It's so.
We keep coming up against it, don't we?
Tease it out, you know.
There's a willful, destructive element here. It's insane. Yeah. These people know full well. It almost doesn't. For argument's sake, let's say the climate's normal, right? When it goes to any extreme, the only reason crops succeed as they do during any time of extreme, say the extreme heat waves of the 1970s, I don't know, pick a decade, is because of oil-based fertilizers. Mm-hmm. That's the only reason we've had stability.
Right.
Since the Great Depression, since the Great Dust Bowl,
right.
Since the Great Global Famine, which it was of the 1930s, which was the hottest year objectively on record in the modern era of the 1930s. It's been the oil-based economy
that has saved lives,
that has fed us all in that time. So they're taking away that which the hand that feeds. The hand that gave us that, it was Rockefeller Oil, Big Oil, the Seven Sisters oil companies that set up that agribusiness in the first place, is now saying, we're packing up and going home. And the rest of us are supposed to go,
the rest of us are meant to pray for Ukraine.
Well, this brings me to a specific country. I think it's worth looking at because it's connected here. Have you seen what's happening in Sri Lanka?
Yes, but
you want to do something first?
No, I just wanted to comment on that article, that RT article that we just had up there, Scott, if you put it back up for a second. Go down to the tweet. Just so the Biden administration basically in this ruling shut down potential oil fields that would increase supply and solve, at least help to mitigate the what they're doing in terms of sanctioning Russia and all that kind of stuff. But this guy, Dan K. Eberhardt, in his tweet, he says, the decision to cancel Alaska oil and gas lease sale makes zero sense in this energy-constrained environment. America is short on supply and consumers are paying the price at the pump. So you have the administration doing something in terms of not cancelling leases that would produce oil. And this guy is basically the chief executive of Canary LLC, which is a Denver-based drilling services company. Basically, he's the guy who would have maybe taken those leases to produce oil. And he's saying he's at the coalface, let's say. He knows the industry and what's actually happening in the industry and how it's affecting consumers. And he says it's ridiculous, it's crazy. Why would they do that? I mean, when we're already constrained, why would you shut off the taps when we're already constrained? Shut off new potential taps. So it's an example like of what you're saying, of this almost conscious policy against all the evidence and against the evidence or the opinions of people who know what they're talking about, because they're the ones who actually have their finger on the pulse of the whole supply and consumption of oil and gas and the need for it, but they're ignored.
Yeah.
Anyway, carry on.
Sri Lanka. So there's been some serious rioting in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
These last 2 months, I think, but it's really gone up a notch in the last week. I've got some videos. I'm gonna send them all three actually to you at once, Scott. Maybe you can play one after the other. It's crazy. So it began as protests, relatively peaceful. Then it became riots. And at this point, they're chasing down politicians. The government has fallen. Well, let's just look at these two for now. Yeah, the Prime Minister has officially resigned. I forget his name, but he's part of a clan that's been in power for, certainly behind the scenes in Sri Lanka for decades. So let's look at this first one here. This is footage of a politician's car being chucked in the river this week. And it's gone. A whole fleet of cars, I believe.
And people are suffering, and the people are living with 1 meal per day. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? I'm so sorry to say this.
Okay, let's go to the next one. This has police on the run from protesters. I think I've heard that something like 200 people have been killed. That'll be protesters or police. Okay, in these next two videos, the first one is allegedly the Prime Minister's son, his fleet of expensive cars. Let's see what happened to them. Don't bother with the sound, it's just some music.
We don't want any Bangla.
What are they, Lamborghinis?
Yeah.
How many do you need? They're all the same colour, for God's sake. And they're gone.
And they're burned.
They found where he lived, broke in, and they torched them all. The Prime Minister resigned, but a mob still burned down his house. That's the next video. One of his homes, anyway, in Colombo, Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
There's the Prime Minister's name. Mahinda Rajapaksa. A house. This tweet claims houses of many MPs have also been burned down.
Mm-hmm.
Security forces have been given a shoot on sight issue. Just start shooting people. I don't know how far along that is. There's a report here from France 24. This is from today. Some more details about how crazy this situation is. This is what it's going to happen like more and more often. When people are reduced to 1 meal a day, food riots, like this was we mentioned it before. This is what sparked the Egypt uprising back in 2011.
Yeah.
France 24, Sri Lanka orders offensive to contain riots. Can you search for "but the crisis moved"? Okay. So, but the crisis moved into a darker phase on Monday, last Monday, I guess, when government supporters with sticks and clubs attacked demonstrators who had been protesting peacefully for weeks, demanding the president's resignation. Mobs then retaliated across the country late into the night, torching dozens of homes of ruling party politicians. Scroll down. Mahinda Rajapaksa had to be rescued in that's the president of the country, had to be rescued in a pre-dawn military operation on Tuesday and taken to a naval dockyard for safety after protests tried to storm. They did succeed in storming his official residence. One ruling party politician gunned down 2 people on Monday night after his car was surrounded. Another politician shot dead a 27-year-old man and then himself, police said.
It's mad.
So it's a full-bore chaos here. So
why?
What happened in Sri Lanka? Okay, the government last year declared that all farming would become organic.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually an election manifesto. It sounded attractive enough, and they passed it last year. But people's understanding was that it would be a 10-year process.
Mm-hmm.
That this transition would take place because it takes time. Literally, the soil cannot take it overnight. If you've been using oil-based fertilizer for so long, you can't just do it overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when it came to law, he said, I want it like that. Crops failed all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't stand the heat, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
It has extreme climate there.
Mm-hmm.
Tea crop failed 20%. Tea crop is their main cash crop, their main export crop in Sri Lanka. Failed. Yeah, so it was sold to people as going green.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a crazy detail here in the following report that brings us back to what we were getting at before. This element of willful destruction in the way this thing was put through.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're either very stupid people in power or they're very stupid and have something else that they're trying to achieve. Headline here from Science: Sri Lanka's problems are anything but organic. So they're going to argue. Scroll down here. It's a short article, but it's worth getting the analysis out here. Okay, so the main problem is indeed, as is being discussed in media reports about this, organic farming. And yet the collapse of Sri Lanka's economy has had little to do with organic farming per se, and much more to do with disastrous handling of its economy, specifically how this measure was put in place. They banned inorganic...
It says down towards the bottom, the first thing to note about Sri Lanka's decision to ban the import of inorganic fertilizers is that it was based on desperation rather than planning.
Yeah.
Over a period of 10 years, that's what you were saying, not overnight. No large-scale plan was drawn up, no public discussions with farmers was undertaken, and the people in government pushing the policies included those who come up with locally made syrups to combat the COVID-19 pandemic.
Scroll down a bit more. I think I remember it gives a hint as to why they did this so rashly. They were under some kind of pressure. Oh, yeah. I get it now. So because of the lockdowns,
right,
the country, their main actual profit comes from tourism. So because of the lockdowns, tourism fell off a cliff.
Mm-hmm.
The country's foreign exchange reserve plummeted. And because of this huge loss and the cost of importing, they've no oil, right? So they have to import oil-based fertilizers that they don't manufacture themselves, that the country imposed a ban on it, forcing 2/3 of its population that depends on agriculture to suddenly scramble to make a shift to organic farming. Anyway, so crops fell. It's man-made, it's willful.
Oil prices going through the roof as well as a result of Western sanctions against Russia. So it's multifaceted, and it's all making a situation, a difficult situation, much, much worse deliberately. And Sri Lanka is a good example. It's 21 million people or so live in the country. It's just off the south coast of India. And, it's an island, decent-sized island, but, it could be, what you're seeing in Sri Lanka, what you're seeing in Sri Lanka as a result of, mismanagement by government, corrupt government, and the global situation, which is being mismanaged essentially and like almost deliberately so by Western powers who are at the head of it. That situation could you'll start to see that spreading into India proper in the near future, probably over the course of this year.
Yeah. The article makes an analogy. So the crazy decision they made with banning the import of fertilizers, the author says, to make an analogy, this would be the equivalent of India running out of foreign exchange reserves to buy coal from overseas and shutting down all coal power plants except those that could be run on locally sourced fuel. So that brings us back to Alaska. Like, you're in a situation where the supply is already tight. And the one thing you shouldn't do, you do.
Right.
Like, why? Logically, it's illogical. But
it's mindless, unless you've got another agenda.
Right, and this outcome riots to the point of the government falling. Like, he's resigned, but people are still rioting. I don't know how. I don't know how elites in general think they're going to get through this. You know, there is, Sri Lanka shows there is no splendid isolation. People are smart. They have internet. They have cell phones. They'll figure out where your other home is up in the hills, and they'll burn it to the ground. You know, it's going to be complete chaos if if this is the template for what's going to follow in other countries. Once people get down to one meal a day,
Right.
it's complete insanity.
For sure. China.
We're China. We're trying to do the same thing. Can you imagine 1.5 billion people?
China's at least smarter than that in that sense, where they have a pretty significant grain storage stocks to avoid just that kind of situation. At least in the short term. Interesting article from, I think you have it, Scotty. Is it Reuters? Yeah, Reuters. Kind of, you know, you have it, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, throw it up there. China wants to take. Reuters is always good because they just give you the facts straight up when they're allowed to. China wants to take Taiwan peacefully, but is preparing militarily. U.S. intelligence officials. Fourth paragraph. It is our view. Sorry, it's not probably the fourth one. Anyway, it is our view that they, the Chinese, are working hard to effectively put themselves in a position in which their military is capable of taking Taiwan over our intervention. Despite our intervention, or because of our, in fact, because of our intervention would be more accurate. Blah blah blah. Lessons China may be taking from the war in Ukraine. China was learning some very interesting lessons from the Ukraine conflict, including the importance of leadership and small unit tactics, as well as effective training with the right weapons and a strong non-commissioned police force. So it's just that's more or less it. But that's on the back burner. But it's possible that it could happen at some point this year, and it'll be because the US pushes them to it in the same way they pushed Russia, because they were planning for a war against Russia using Ukraine for the past 8 years. You know, the US in a similar way is planning to bring the Taiwan situation to a head in order to put pressure, you know, in order to just overturn the apple cart. Basically, they seem to be in the process of wanting to upset the whole chessboard, like not just upset it, but toss it up in the air, as we've just been discussing in various different ways. And the end result is going to be, you know, significant amounts of suffering for large numbers of people on the planet, progressively, starting with the third world countries or second world countries, and spottily in different places, depending on the conditions on the ground in those particular countries. But someone somewhere, you know, and we should drop a list basically of all of the policies that they're pursuing. You know what I mean? That clearly, unequivocally, have a very bad outcome, or counterintuitive. Not just counterintuitive, but illogical, massively illogical and irrational. Because we just talk about them, you know, here and there, but it's just, you know, and it's hard to grasp, because it leads people. If you look at the details of it, you can't avoid that conclusion. If you're a rational person, you can't avoid it. But people stop there and backtrack because it leads them inexorably to the conclusion that there are people in positions of power, and, you know, absolute power, let's say, almost on this planet, at least in the domain of human affairs, who are deliberately trying to wreck the world and wreck it for the average person on the street, the average member of the population, and nobody wants to go there. Very few people are able to go there because it's well, there's nothing you can do about it. And we've talked about this before. Is that, or I've mentioned it before, that the reason conspiracy theories, the denigration of the idea of the term conspiracy theory, gains so much traction amongst the average person in the population, and why so many people take up the poo-pooing of conspiracies, is because people intuit automatically, unconsciously, that all conspiracy theories, the truth that all conspiracy theories have a common underlying theme or kind of idea, and it's that people in positions of power over the population are malintended towards them. They're out to get them in some way. They're doing things that are deliberately trying to screw over members of the population. And people know that because all conspiracy theories have that as implied. That's the commonality between all conspiracy theories, is that there's a powerful group of people who are not very nice people and don't like the average member of the population, and they're out to get them. And people just don't want to go there. Who wants to live in a world like that? Because the main problem with it is that there's nothing you can do about it. The thesis of conspiracy theories carries within it, or has within it, the inability of the person considering it to do anything about it when it directly impacts them. So I'm telling you, Neil, here's a problem that is going to directly impact you, cause you to suffer, cause you to suffer psychologically, emotionally, because you have to believe that, understand that you're in a world not a very nice place, run by not very nice people, and it's also going to make you suffer directly. And most importantly, there's nothing you can do about it. Do you want to talk about that for a while? No. No thanks. Why would I? In fact, not only do I not want to talk about it, I want to reject the idea. Out of hand. I want to reject it out of hand. Because there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, so did you see the game last night?
There you go. Let's talk about
Yeah. It was a great match.
the Eurovision.
It was a great match. Yeah.
How about them Bears?
No. That's exactly it. But I would say that it's not just, that's not completely fair. There is an out. There's a trade-off. There is a benefit to going there.
Maybe, what?
It's not that you're
What is
correct
that?
in that you cannot do anything about it unless you want to raise an army, you know. But you're not Putin, so your knowing about it vastly improves your chances of navigating your way through it better. Just being aware of it.
But what if I don't feel like I'm any good on my own and that I need government? The government that you say is out to get me. Do we need to throw in our analogy of the children?
No.
Small children, abusive parents, no matter how much abuse, children still have to believe that parents are good, because without parents, I'm no good on my own. I can't drive a car, I can't get a job, I'm dependent on them. So no matter how much they abuse me, I still have to believe that they're doing it for my good, that they love me. A lot of people are like that, it seems. That's, for me, that's the thing that makes sense, explains why so many people refuse to accept the evidence in front of their eyes and fly into denial, fly into the comfortable, pleasant narrative or lie, rather than face the difficult truth. Because they can't handle it, because of the implications of the difficult truth. It puts them in a bind, it puts them in a very difficult position, and they're being exploited because of that fragility they have, that inability to deal with the, let's say, the stress of accepting that that's the way the world works, and that you have to start taking responsibility for yourself. It's like telling a child, take responsibility for yourself. What do you mean take responsibility for myself? I'm 3 years old, my feet don't reach the pedals in the car, no one will take me for a job, I can't get a proper job, and I can't reach the counter in the supermarket, and I don't even know how to count money.
Yeah.
You know,
Metaphorically.
Metaphorically,
Yeah.
and in the macro scale, you know, in
Yeah.
terms of living dealing with, doing all the things that I have become used to government doing for me, or providing for myself all the things that I have been used to government providing for me, not least of which is, security, but also food and the availability of food, so it's difficult.
It's interesting how this all comes back to the basics. Food and famine.
Yeah. And heating, which is directly linked to food, I suppose.
Heating, and they have one common denominator.
Electricity,
Oil and
Gas.
gas. And it's...
You can have food, but you can't have any frozen food or any cooled food if you don't have regular energy production. Your refrigerator and your freezer isn't going to work. So you better start eating Heinz beans or something. Stock up in the Heinz beans. But even they have a shelf life. The college fix. One last thing. Roe versus Wade. Abortion. We talked about this last week and we didn't really want to talk about it because it's kind of like such a no-brainer, and I don't understand why people are taking extreme... Well, I do kind of know why that's being forced on people to take an extreme position one way or the other. There's obviously answers to a simple solution to abortion, but nobody wants to talk about it. It's either absolutely yes or absolutely no. But put up the college fix. I know it's not directly related, but it kind of is. Middle schoolers. This is in, where is this? Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, apparently middle schoolers, which is something like when you're in 8th grade or something. I don't know. You're 6 or something, 5 or 6. I don't know. 3 male students at a Wisconsin middle school have been charged with Title X-based harassment for allegedly using incorrect pronouns with a classmate. So 3 kids didn't use their classmates' requested pronouns. We're talking about 6 or 7-year-old here. Requested pronouns of they and them, and a section in the Title IX law which prohibits gender-based harassment in the form of name-calling on the basis of sex. The mother of one of them said the use of the pronouns was confusing her son, and so she told him to call the classmate by their actual name. Yeah, it's only a short article, but it's an example of just how far down the chain this kind of nonsense has gone, you know, and how it's been taken up by people down at that level in the chain, like in a middle school, some random middle school in Wisconsin. As teachers who are teaching 7 or 8-year-old kids have allowed criminal charges to be filed against 3 of the students for not using they or them for another classmate. Now, what the other thing is, why is there one of their classmates who's 7 or 8 years old who is demanding that they be called they or them instead of he or she? Anyway, that's just a small sample of the kind of crap that's going on in the land of the free.
Well, I suppose your analogy then would explain that because parents said this is all okay. Like, if the parents said you can jump into the fire, you can jump into the fire. If your parents said you can abuse your actual children, it's okay.
Yeah.
You can confuse them, abuse them, make them suicidal, which most of them do end up at some point.
No moral compass.
Jordan Peterson warned about this in 2016. He raised the flag about this happening in Canada. He says
And
this
told to shut
pronoun
up.
thing is going to go, it's going to end up with this, and it has. So,
Yep. Anyway, you got some good news?
yeah,
Go.
good news. South Ossetia, formerly part of Georgia, is going to hold a referendum to accede to the Russian Federation in July. So one way or another, Russia's going to be bigger this year than it was last year, regardless of what happens in Ukraine.
What's going to happen in Ukraine is that I think the policy or the plan for Ukraine is it's the same plan it's been all along. I mean, forget about the 2 days to take Kiev and all that bullshit that the media put out, and Russia's failing and all that kind of stuff. Russia, obviously, like was said repeatedly, and I'll say again, Russia had a plan from the very beginning that was developed over quite a long time before the actual invasion, and it involved pretty much exactly what they're doing. It'll probably continue on over the rest of this year, and I think they're probably betting on things going a bit pear-shaped in terms of particularly European countries and maybe even America coming into this winter with gas, oil shortages and domestic problems as a result of that, to distract attention of Western governments away from Ukraine and away from Russia, and maybe make them, in a certain sense, maybe sue for some kind of peace, to make them wake them up a little bit and make them reprioritize. So Russia's in no hurry to, do what it has planned to do in Ukraine, and it'll continue on for the rest of this year. But like I said, with some, obviously, punctuated by some kind of, some provocation or some bullshit or some, and obviously punctuated by repeated hysterical reporting in the Western media, as has been, and maybe something big. But whether or not it'll expand this year beyond, that's a possibility as well. Poland, looking at you. Finland's going to join. Sweden's going to join NATO. Don't think that's going to make much difference. The Russians are like, that's a bad idea. Don't do that. We'll just have to point our missiles at you. Finland's like, okay. We
Things
don't mind.
happening, yeah.
Yeah, it's happening. It's
Croatia's joined the Eurozone this week. Like, everyone's getting deeper into their groove,
They're all getting together so they can all suffer together.
South Ossetia, I would say, it's also the Russian world Russiski Mir. Actually, I say there's popular will pressure from below in South Set for the people. They want in. No, we want in on this team. You know,
it's kind of
it's a natural process.
It's symbolic though. The South Ossetia thing, I think, is 50,000 people, so it's not exactly significant on a practical level, but more symbolic. You know, just a little sliver of land there. You know, a bit like Transnistria.
Okay, it's teeny. I didn't realize it was that small.
Yeah,
it looks bigger than that, but I guess it's mountainous. Yeah. Well, the Telegraph are having a field day. They think this go slow thing in Donbass is, quote, strategic miscalculations have doomed Putin's Donbass offensive.
Yeah, they don't...
Doomed.
Yeah, I mean,
Really?
I suppose that gains traction with a lot of people because they keep hearing the same thing over and over again, that Russia's failing, Russia's doomed, Russia's made a mistake, it's all going wrong, Putin's got cancer, Putin's going to die, all of his generals are dead, all the tanks have exploded, all the Russian soldiers have got syphilis.
They've all deserted.
They've all got COVID. They've all got AIDS. I don't know, whatever. And I'm just like, people who are into the Western narrative probably like that because it reconfirms them what they want to believe. But I don't really care. I'm interested in what's actually happening, and clearly, what's actually happening is very different from what the Western media is reporting. Yeah.
But it is going slow, deliberately.
Well, deliberately,
yeah.
But they're just taking their time.
Yeah.
You know, when there's no point in having trying to have a blitzkrieg and it all,
unless you're in a hurry to do something else.
Yeah,
but you're
piling up on
you're
top
not going
of each
anywhere
other.
else.
No.
Yeah.
And of course, the West is taking advantage of that and trying to prolong it as well. But like I said, this winter, the West is going to have some serious problems of its own at home that are going to, I would expect or would hope that at least will make them reprioritize a little bit. You know what I mean? And that's not even including the idea of the conflict expanding outside the borders of Ukraine, westwards into Europe, which would be, the hysteria would be just awesome. The hysteria in Western media would be fantastic. I look forward to that, actually, to reading the press on that day. I just, sit back and, eat some gummy bears or something and just browse and just laugh, you know what I mean? It'll be hysterical,
Yeah. And watch the ruble just continue to climb.
Yeah. Watch everything that they say is happening not happen.
Yeah.
In dramatic form, Yeah. So, is that all you've got?
Today is Nakba Day in Palestine. That's the day they commemorate the first big push, I suppose, by
ethnic cleansing.
Yeah, by the colonial settlers in the Middle East who arrived to populate a land without a people for people without a land.
Mm-hmm. Supposedly.
Greatest myth of the 20th century, or one of anyway. And they, for their part, the Israelis seem to commemorate it by shooting an Al Jazeera journalist in the face.
And then attacking
I think
her
it was
funeral.
Was it caught on camera?
I think
he was giving a report. Yeah. She's got the blue press flak jacket on. She's got a blue press helmet on, and then they shoot her in the face.
And then attack her funeral.
And then they attack her funeral. Like, who's doing PR here? Is that deliberate? Is that willful? Do they not give a damn how that looks?
No, Israel doesn't care. Israel's protected up the wazoo by everybody. It has been for a long time.
They attack Syria daily. It's almost the background now. We don't even mention it anymore, but it's a daily process.
Yeah. Which is interesting that we can have that kind of thing going on that Israel has been doing against the Palestinians and in Syria for many, many years, and it's been normalized and it continues on just like a continuous war. Yemen ignored, ongoing conflict in Yemen, or has been, and the Western media and Western populations don't care, but because of it's Russia and Ukraine, hysteria, and everybody has to think differently about that. I mean, just the contradiction, the contrast between the two, and the contradiction, and how, you're talking about people living with two contradictory ideas in their head. Apparently, people in the West can do that very well. They live
just fine.
Yeah, but they can only do it because they're lied about one. And lied about the other as well. Lied about both.
Yeah.
It's not actually living with two contradictory ideas. It's like being aware of both of them and understanding that both can be possibly true or possibly right. But in this case, that's not the case here. You know what I mean? I mean, because they're not getting accurate information about the two ideas. The contradiction is manufactured for them. You know.
I remember years ago you were warning me that, you know, Neil, there won't
The
be
contradiction is flipped. Actually, go ahead.
there won't be a day where you'll get to go, oh look, this has developed. It's in the news everywhere. It's exposed everything, and now everyone can see.
Yeah.
Because what's happened since then is that so many things have been exposed, like in unbelievable ways. Like it's literally striptease. Just the whole Syria thing where it exposed Al Qaeda and the CIA, just and MI6 and Mossad. Like that undid 20 years, but people just adapted the bottomless ability of people to lie to themselves and to just take on new lies to sort of, oh, here's a contradiction resolved, and they just go, nah, I don't see that, I'm just going to lie around it again and carry on, and then on they go to the next thing, and here we are in Ukraine, and it's endless ability, and reality, the universe, God, whatever, allows, apparently, it has no problem with it.
But again,
to some point,
it's authorities and governments and the media. It's not about things being exposed, but about the meaning, what that means, what the exposure of a big kind of a thing, something that people believe to be true, and now it's been revealed that it's not true. That's not enough. It would be enough if people were left just with that information, but they're given a whole narrative, a meaning, what this means by the media and by government, and that just, you know, messes with their heads, messes with their ability to call a spade, and they end up calling a spade a banana, you know, and because the media tells them that's what it is. So it's the meaning that's ascribed to it.
Dynamic narratives.
Exactly. Shifting it all the time, yeah. Switching it up. Anyway, we pretty much did a tour of the world there, except we didn't, we touched on everywhere except
New Zealand, Canada. Did we do Canada?
Yeah.
We got close to Canada.
Close to
Buffalo
Canada.
was right there on the border.
Yeah. China,
Finland,
Europe. Didn't do South America. There's nothing going on down there.
South
It's
America.
winter down there. Winter is coming.
OVNIs. They have
UFOs.
lots of OVNIs, don't
Lots
they?
of UFOs. Maybe
Yeah.
they've all been abducted. Anyways, yeah. No, there's obviously stuff
Something's
going
going to happen to South America.
Yeah.
And we'll be discussing it.
Yes, one of these days, when it sticks its head above the parapet. Yeah. So anyway, we hope you enjoyed the show. We'll leave it there for this week. Hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks for commenting, listening, and chatting, and thanks for your questions, comments, etc. Yeah. Don't forget to smash all the buttons, because smashing buttons is awesome. And we'll be back next week with another show. And until then, have a good day, morning, evening, night, afternoon, whatever it is with you. See ya.
See ya.
Can't stop the signal now.